A while ago, I did a Bill Whittle video where I referred tangentially to this one, and I always meant to come back and do this video where Whittle and Andrew Klaven argue that you cannot really be an atheist and a conservative at the same time. It's been a while, but here I go, diving into the unfortunate misconception that a lot of people have that conservatism and religion have anything at all to do with each other.
Andrew, your question today comes from Hambone2.
Hambone.
Can a conservative be an atheist?
I love this question. This is a great question. I love this question because I can give a controversial answer. My answer is twofold. Obviously, a conservative can be an atheist. There are many atheist conservatives. An atheist can be a good person. An atheist can be a more moral person than a religious person. An atheist can be a more conservative person than a religious person. I don't think you can actually be an atheist conservative and have your philosophy make sense.
You were doing so well there, Andrew. See, here's the thing. He starts off right. You can be an atheist and a conservative at the same time. Conservatism is a political ideology. It has nothing whatsoever to do with religious or irreligious beliefs. Nothing at all. You can be a good conservative and a good atheist and a lot of other things as well, so long as you don't deal with contradictory philosophical ideas, which conservatism and atheism do not. It's too bad that Andrew goes straight off the rails after this, though.
Now, that is not as important as it seems. It's obviously, it's more important that you rescue the princess from the dragon than that you can explain why. But here's why I think that there is something spiritual at the bottom of conservatism. The essential component of conservatism is the individual. You cannot be a conservative, an American conservative, without believing in the importance, the sacredness of the freedom of the individual. And when you think about the individual and when you think about the requirement that he be free, the fact that it is right that he be free, a lot of questions come up. Like, for instance, what is an individual and why should he be free?
But that's a problem. And if you think that you need a God at the core of your conservatism, you've already got a logically inconsistent worldview. You cannot be free if there's a God controlling you, if there's a God holding eternal life or eternal damnation over your head, if you have to follow the laws of some God or being punished for not doing so. That's the very definition of slavery. Now, let's be honest here. There's no such thing as true and complete freedom. You cannot be free in any worthwhile society to go around and shoot people or rape people or steal people's property. You are never going to have the freedom to harm others. The idea that freedom and the importance of the individual is of paramount importance to conservatism, at least their version of conservatism, makes such conservatism immediately irrational because it immediately fails any interaction with reality.
Why should people like Barack Obama, who know so much more than we do, who are so much wiser, who know much better how to invest our money, why shouldn't they force us to do what they want us to do? Why is our choice better? I mean, I hear a lot of conservatives trying to make the sort of practical case that I know better what to invest my money in than Barack Obama does. But that might not be true in every case, and yet I would insist that in every case it is right that I get to invest my money where I want, rather than Obama getting to invest my money where he wants.
Well, yes and no. Sure, there ought to be a good deal of your own money that you have control over to invest where you want, but that isn't going to be the case for all money unless you want to have anarchy, where nobody does anything for the public good. We are going to have to spend some of your money, taken in taxes, to pay for police and fire services, to pay for roads, to pay for basic infrastructure, etc. That ought to be a minimal amount, shared among all, but the fact remains you're not going to be able to invest and keep every red cent that you make and have complete and total control over it. It's just not a realistic view.
And the reason for that is because we come from a philosophy, which is Christianity, or you can call it Judeo-Christianity. There is no country on earth that respects the individual and respects freedom of the individual that was not once a Christian country. The one possible exception would be Japan, which was refashioned in our image,
That's
forcibly refashioned in our image.
Absolutely.
But that's the thing. The United States was never a Christian nation. I'm sorry, but it's true. The Treaty of Tripoli spells it out very clearly that the government of the United States of America is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion. There's a difference between a nation whose citizens are largely Christian and a nation whose political makeup and design is Christian. This isn't one of them.
Well, why is that? Why is that? It's because that sacredness of the individual comes from a philosophy. It comes from, you could put it in one sentence, that God created man in his image, which means that there is an ultimate good. There's something that is ultimately good, that can't be questioned, that goes beyond that toddler test, what I call the toddler test of why. At some point, when you reach God, you reach the ultimate good, and we are made in that image and can respond toward it and move toward that good. That's where our respect for the individual comes from. It comes from that sense. And if you don't believe in that, you can still believe in the individual, you can still believe in freedom, you can still believe in conservatism. I'm just not sure why you do. That's the only thing I would say.
Now wait a minute. You just went from talking about how Obama isn't allowed to take your money and do things against your will, forgetting for a moment that he was elected by popular vote to do exactly that. And I don't hear them whining about how horrible it was when Ronald Reagan or George Bush did exactly the same thing for exactly the same reason when they were elected to exactly the same office. But then he starts saying that his respect for the individual comes from God. But to keep to the same idea, doesn't the Bible call for a 10% tithe to be paid to the church? In both Leviticus and Numbers, believers are ordered to hand over money to the church. Isn't that God telling you what to do with your money? Whatever happened to individual freedom to do what you want with your money? Beyond that, I don't respect an individual because some imaginary man in the sky supposedly says so in a book of Bronze Age mythology. That's utterly idiotic. I respect the individual because I'm an individual, and I not only do not want others unnecessarily telling me what to do, I recognize that others are individuals as well and realize that they deserve the same rights and privileges that I want. It's called enlightened self-interest, and it's the basis of all human morality.
I'll split a couple hairs with you here. It's kind of an issue of how many Richard Dawkinses can dance on the head of a pin. I was an atheist for many years in my middle years, and I certainly don't have that kind of arrogance anymore. We talked earlier about humility, and it's amazing what humility will do to broaden your perspective about things that you think you know all about that are utterly beyond your comprehension, and always will be.
Sure, because thinking you're bestest buds with the creator of the universe is so humble.
But without question, one of the things I've come to realize is that your fundamental premise is 100% correct. That everything that we admire about this society that we love, about this vision of America, is predicated on Judeo-Christian values, and especially on the Christian idea that your conscience is an internal governor of your behavior, and if you have an internal source of virtue, you do not need a powerful state keeping you in line. The antithesis of Sharia is what we believe in. It's not a question of keeping the options off the table. You do whatever you want to. You should have an internal conscience, you should have an internal sense of morality and virtue, and that will govern your behavior, and good people can be left alone.
Absolutely. That's why there's never any child molesting in the Catholic Church. Why Christian parents who refuse to provide medical treatment for their children never have those children drop dead of easily curable diseases. And why megachurch pastors never try to fleece their flocks for things like private jets and huge mansions. Those things never happen because those people are such good people with internal moral compasses handed out by God. Thanks for clearing that up for us, Bill. Besides, when you have a ridiculously authoritarian God that issued nearly 700 moral laws in the Old Testament alone, where do you get the idea of God leaving good people alone? God sure the hell didn't. Read your fucking Bible.
You could make the case, however, that those values being baked into the society, which they are, produce a set of behaviors that are noble and admirable, and that an atheist can look at the source of these things and say, I don't believe that these people, but this business that the founders were all atheists is nonsense. It's utter nonsense. Yeah. So I'm not trying to make that case at all. But what you could say is, these people believed in a God, which I don't believe in. They created a set of morals and values, which I do believe in. I abide by those set of values. They came from a source that I don't particularly believe was divinely inspired. Nevertheless, they have an integrity and they work, and that's what I believe in. And that's how you can be an atheist and a conservative. There's no question about that.
Except that the vast majority of our founding fathers weren't Christians. They were deists. They escaped from Europe to get away from religious cultures and societies who were forcing their religious beliefs on people who didn't share them. That's why people came to America in the first place. Now, sure, a lot of the colonies turned right around and tried to do the exact same thing now that their religion was the one in charge. But the founding fathers recognized that this was a problem. That's why the separation of church and state was a fundamental principle in the founding of this nation.
But I do think that when we come back to this issue of humility, there comes a point when you have to understand the limits of human perception. And as I get into that, I've seen a remarkable series on imagining the 10th dimension. And when you really start to get into the idea that in four-dimensional space there is no time, that the universe was created whole. It is always been there. It always has been there. Everything that has happened, always will happen. What we're seeing here in three-dimensional space are little cross-sections of four-dimensional worms of us that move through the dimension of time. Then higher dimensions beyond that, it gets a little dicey, I think, when you start talking about the limits of our perception in a little piece of protein the size of a cantaloupe. For us to just automatically say, no, this is not possible. Yeah. That's where I kind of abandoned the atheist train quite a long time.
And welcome to the argument from ignorance. You don't understand something, it's too difficult for you, it becomes emotionally problematic for you, therefore you just throw it out and believe something else, something that makes you feel good and that doesn't make your brain hurt quite so much. So rather than accept what science shows to be most likely true, you'd rather believe in a magical man in the sky that has no evidence whatsoever, who is authoritarian in the extreme, who rules by threat of eternal punishment, and then you get mad at Obama for doing what he's doing. Seriously?
Well, yeah, and I think again, as I said from the start, I thoroughly believe that you can be an utterly good conservative and an atheist, and of course you can. What I'm saying, though, is if you think it through, if you really think what it is that you're saying about this individual, you are saying that this individual has you're saying there's something sacred about this individual. Yes. And it's not just a bunch of electrons bouncing around. It's not just a chicken and a chicken dinner aren't the same thing. It actually is something that is greater than the sum of its parts. And when you think about that for a while, you don't have to come out with any kind of biblical Christianity. I mean, that's not what I'm saying at all. Mm-hmm. But you do start to think like there's something beyond.
But why would you need any of those things? In fact, one of the basic hallmarks of conservatism is personal responsibility. Don't you lose that when you believe some imaginary friend is watching over you, ready to do your bidding when you get on your knees? Oh yeah, I know it doesn't work that way, because if it did, considering all the religious wingnuts out there probably praying for Barack Obama to get struck by a meteor or something like that, this nation wouldn't be in the mess that it's in. The fact is, if you're going to be responsible for yourself and your actions and the consequences of your actions, then having a Bible-based bully that you think is going to back you up whenever things don't go your way would seem to go against taking responsibility for yourself, wouldn't it?
Where does this idea of wrong come from? What is right and what is wrong? Why can't it be right that I force you to do something? I mean, you just think it's wrong, yeah. And that's my problem with that kind of thinking. It doesn't ask the next why question. And I think that you do have to believe in an ultimate source of good, and it does have to have something to do, as you said, with conscience and the human heart.
Except that's not the God that Christians believe in. That's not really the God that anyone believes in. In fact, I'd argue that believing that God just handed down these moral precepts from on high and they can't be questioned is doing exactly what you're arguing against. You're not asking why. Why is it wrong to kill someone? After all, God commanded genocide in the Old Testament. Heck, God committed genocide on a global scale. God allowed slavery. God orders people to murder witches and stone their disobedient children. This is biblical morality, guys. I'm glad we have nothing like that in America.
I'd rather live in a society that had a fundamental belief that the soul of a newborn baby girl will outlast the earth and is more important than everything on this rock. There's a quality to that kind of culture that gives me peace and a sense of security.
I think it does for everybody. Yeah.
Rather than being one of the many masses who toil for the good of the eternal state. And
exactly.
You have now reached the peak of maximum efficiency. Here's your pain pills. Go die in peace.
Good job. Yeah.
Not if you listen to the Bible, which makes it very clear that newborns up to a month old aren't even considered human. Of course, they have no clue what's actually in the Bible because, like most Christians, they cherry-pick the parts they like and ignore the parts they don't, and they aren't interested in having a rationally cohesive worldview. They just want to feel good. They say so themselves. Atheists, at least rational atheists, don't just pick things that are emotionally comforting. We examine the world objectively. We put together our views based on what's factually and objectively true, and then build worldviews based on what works. It doesn't matter if it makes us feel good. We want a nation and a world where societies function effectively and efficiently, where people interact intellectually and peacefully, and where the whole puzzle fits together in such a way that everything keeps working with a minimum of bashing with hammers. That's conservatism. But we're not looking for help from an imaginary friend in the sky. We're doing it ourselves, taking responsibility for our own actions, making our own decisions, just like Whittle and Klaven seem to want. They're just not aware that they're just mindless slaves to a non-existent master. So there you have it. As I keep telling people, conservatism is a political philosophy, not a religious one. It's sad how many people have to try to shoehorn religion into their politics because otherwise the world is just too scary a place to be. Conservative atheists can get to the same conservative ideals for entirely rational reasons, where conservative Christians often have to pick and choose which parts of the Bible can get them to their preconceived notions. Conservative atheism just makes sense. Conservative theism does not. Thanks for listening. Comment, like, and subscribe, and be sure to share the video everywhere. Stick the URL to phone polls if you think it'll help. If you have any suggestions, please send them here, and be sure to come back for my next video not too far away.